Welcome back. Now, Finance Minister Michael McGrath is finalising draft legislation that could see banks and ATM operators reinstalling cash machines in rural areas that have been taken away over the past few years.
Good news. What do you think? Let us know. Here to talk about this new access to money laws is Daragh Cassidy from bonkers.ie and rural business owner Jonathan Powell in Clifton. Good morning to you, Jonathan. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Daragh, let's start off with yourself. So this new legislation that has been brought in by the Finance Minister, give us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, sure. So it's called the Access to Cash Bill, and it's doing three main things. First of all, it's going to regulate the ATM sector a little bit better, well, hopefully, because at the moment what people may not realise is that around 3/4 of ATM machines have actually been sold to private operators and they're not regulated by the central bank. So there is technically a little bit of a wild west out there at the moment where they could charge anything. So it's going to do that, which I would support.
Because we all know if you go into, the petrol station or whatever, and you've got those ATM machines that you sit there, you might know how much you're being charged to withdraw cash on those things.
Yeah, and at the moment it tends to be nothing, I suppose, because when they were sold there was an agreement that charges wouldn't be brought in, but that has now gone. And as I said, they're not regulated by the central bank, so they could in future charge anything. And anyone who is watching, who has been to maybe America, for example, you can sometimes be charged $5 or $6 to take out a few euros. So I think that's definitely to be welcomed. The second thing it will do is it will require certain businesses to have to accept cash. So certain essential services. Now, we're not talking about your local shipper or the pub or the coffee shop, but maybe, for example, the supermarket, a pharmacy, hospital services. And also, as you alluded to, I think, earlier on, it'll require ATMs potentially to be put in certain towns of a certain size so people don't have to travel too far to get money.
Yep.
OK, so will there be a maximum distance? Is that like between ATMs that you won't have to travel? And the other thing is as well, is will they be serviced? Because the amount of ATMs that you go to, then you get to it and it turns out it's not working.
Yeah, this is it. And this is sometimes one of the disadvantages of cash, which I know we'll get into. It's great to be able to take out cash, but sometimes if you only have €20 in your account and all it's letting you take out is 50, it's not actually much use. That still needs to be worked through. I'd imagine there'll be some type of a limit put maybe there needs to be one per every town with at least maybe 2,000 people. I don't think we're going to go back to the situation where with banks and ATMs really in every village up and down the length and breadth of the country as the demand isn't there. But perhaps maybe over the past maybe 5 or 6 years, and particularly after COVID, maybe that move towards a cashless society just went a little bit too quick for some communities, and the government is trying to roll back on that.
We're wondering what you think about this 0896 111 111, because often when you go to a place where you're kind of muscle memory, you go back to the ATM and it's not there and you're like, what the hell is going on here? So I'm just wondering what you think about this. Do you want more of them coming back around the country? Jonathan Powell is the owner of Clifton Bike Shop. Hello, Jonathan. Good morning. How are you doing?
Not too bad, thank you. Good morning, IrelandAM.
It's really lovely to have you here. Clifton is obviously a massive, not just a massive town in the west of Ireland, but it's a huge tourist hub. There's a lot of stuff that goes on there. So for you, is having ATMs and having cash around the place important?
Very much so. I mean, about our business is about 12% of our business is cash currently this year. But yeah, it's a fundamental part of rural communities, and the youth, the elderly, other generations, they all still use cash. So yes, it's very much a fundamental part of our business.
Do you think that a lot of your community would have concerns about that they're being told, and everybody maybe from Dublin and cities is telling them, oh, we have to go cashless, this is the way forward. But actually in rural Ireland and certain areas around Ireland and certain age groups are like, well, we don't want to.
Yeah, this broke last year around about mid-July when the AIB decided to close like 70, 88 or stop taking cash. And that brought on this bill in November, or the first consultation of it. And yeah, it's going to be tricky. It's impossible if that happened, I believe, that sort of thing.
Well, I'm just wondering, because Jonathan, in your area, when it was announced that AIB were going to close all these ATMs around the country, and then they had to do that quite dramatic U-turn because there was sort of uproar about it. What was the reaction in Clifton to that, and when they did the U-turn?
Yeah, there's a bit of, first of all, it's a bit of non-belief. It's like, how can you just sort of like not take cash in the system? It's a fundamental structure. But the most shocking thing, because I rang around and asked a few people as well, most shocking thing I found was that the bank staff, they didn't even know that this was going to happen, that sort of thing. So they were total shock, non-belief. They just couldn't understand why that was happening. What was the reasoning behind it?
So, Daragh, in Ireland, as long as a business notifies a customer in advance, they are allowed to legally refuse cash.
Yes.
Is that insane to think that they're actually able to turn down money and not? Or is this just the way the world is going at the moment? You know?
I'm not sure if
I don't want your money. No.
I'm not sure if it's insane, but some people would say yes. But there is, I mean, people think that cash is free, and sometimes businesses say this, but it's not. Businesses get charged for, well, there's a security charge because you're more at risk of being robbed. There's a charge when you go to deposit that money. There isn't usually a charge sometimes for the consumer, but businesses can be charged quite heavily. So there is a charge, and I think maybe as fewer and fewer people are using cash, particularly maybe in urban areas, not so much maybe in rural areas, it's becoming a bigger onus on businesses to have money just in case that 1 in 20 people comes to pay with cash as opposed to with a card. I do think there's probably maybe a generational divide here, where you probably have a lot of viewers at the moment who are in their late teens and 20s who have never set foot in a branch, and then you might have people in their 50s and 60s for whom cash is still very, very important. And it's just about making sure, I suppose, that we don't move too far too quickly for certain groups of people.
There is a poll up on screen now. Would you be in favour of a cashless society? You can just scan the QR code there with your camera.
It's really interesting that 92% have already said no.
Yeah. See, Daragh, I'm kind of just wondering because there's all the studies show that if you have cash, you spend less money. If you're tapping, you spend more money. You're more flahulak, you'll have 3 coffees instead of 1. Do you know that sort of way?
Yeah, no, I mean, if you have a €50 wad and you're going to buy something, it definitely feels, I suppose, like you're paying for something where it can be very, very easy, you're right.
Yeah.
Just, I suppose, maybe waste money on plastic. For me, one of the benefits, though, is that, I mean, we talk about the black economy. I mean, a lot of businesses sometimes will want to take cash, and let's be honest, I think we know some of the reasons. We've seen it with taxi drivers for a long time. They fought tooth and nail not to accept cards. So there is more money, for example, if people are paying by card. That's maybe more money for taxation or for social welfare and things like that. The other issue, though, is around security. We often talk about the older generation and maybe not feeling comfortable using cards. But I mean, I don't think walking around with wads of cash is particularly safe. We hear of these awful burglaries that happen in rural communities because people are being targeted, sometimes bachelors, people living by themselves, because they have money on the premises, cash on the premises. And I find even myself, I mean, you know, I'm not that big, but I'm still a man. But I find sometimes feeling a little bit vulnerable when I'm taking out cash at an ATM machine late at night. It's something that I don't necessarily want to do. So I do feel the positives outweigh the negatives, but obviously not everyone agrees.
But you're saying that, but there's also a massive increase in scams going on with people with bank accounts and having to try and remember their different passwords, having to change it as well. Jonathan, just finally to you, in Clifton, it's obviously a busy time of year. Like, would you welcome this from Michael McGrath, that ATM's cash is still king, particularly all over Ireland, but more so maybe in the West?
Definitely welcome it. Cash is still alive. It's it's a fundamental structure of society. You've got to keep that cash bill. It's just got to be finessed a little bit and have the little noughts and crosses ticked off, sort of thing.
Just quickly, in terms of moving towards a cashless society, we're still writing around 4 million cheques every single quarter in Ireland. So sometimes when we have this conversation, I always say to people, you know, we're not going to be cashless anytime soon.
4 million
4 million cheques. I mean, a lot of them are probably being written by the government. I don't think people are going into the local shop or trying to check. But still 4 million cheques a quarter. That's a lot.
But I know somebody would only take cheque the other day.
Well, there you go.
I have a checkbook. That's not a thing that will happen.
They wouldn't take cash.
Listen, we think it's really interesting. We know that Jonathan is really busy. He's been chatting with Santa and everything like that because he's in Clifton Bike Shop. It's going to be a very busy time for him. Jonathan Powell, thank you so much. Happy Christmas. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you all.
Lovely to see you. And Daragh, the last day he was in, he said, Merry Christmas. I'm not going to see you before it again. And here he is, Daragh Cassidy from bonkers.ie. Thank you so much.